Let me tell you something uncomfortable. This is going to sound simple, almost boring, but this one trait is why some people build empires and others stay stuck. It's not intelligence. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's something deeper, something quieter, something most people avoid. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because this trait is controlling your results right now, your income, your confidence, your future. And the best part, it's not genetic. It's not rare. It's trainable. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it is and how to build it into your identity. So what is the trait? Extreme personal responsibility, not motivation, not confidence, not ambition, ownership, total ownership over outcomes. Billionaires don't see life as something that happens to them. They see life as something they respond to. They don't wait for fairness. They don't wait for perfect timing. They don't wait for conditions to improve. They assume control first, then they move. When something goes wrong, they don't ask, who caused this? They ask, what part of this is mine? Even when it's not their fault. Even when it's unfair. Even when they could easily blame someone else. Because blame gives comfort, but responsibility gives power. And power is what they're after. Most people want to feel better. Billionaires want to get better. That's the difference. The average person looks outward. They look for reasons. They look for explanations. They look for someone to point at. The billionaire looks inward. They look for leverage. They look for adjustments. They look for what they can change. Same situation, completely different response. One creates excuses. The other creates solutions. This is where the gap starts. Not in money, not in education, not in opportunity, but in interpretation. How you interpret reality determines how you act. How you act determines what you get. And responsibility rewires that entire chain. When you take responsibility, you stop negotiating with life. You stop saying, I'll try, I'll wait, I'll see what happens. You start saying, this is on me. I'll figure it out. I'll adapt. That mindset is dangerous. Now you're no longer dependent on conditions. You're not dependent on luck. You're not dependent on other people. You become the constant variable. No matter what happens, you still move forward. That's why this trait is rare. Because responsibility is heavy. It means no hiding, no excuses, no emotional shortcuts. It means you can't outsource your future. Most people don't want that. They want results without accountability. They want success without discomfort. They want change without responsibility. Billionaires want the opposite. They want the weight, because weight builds strength, and strength builds freedom. When you take responsibility, something strange happens. You stop feeling like a victim. You stop feeling unlucky. You stop feeling trapped. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. You realize you may not control the world, but you control your response to it. And response is where all power lives. This is why two people can face the same situation, same market, same industry, same timing. One collapses, the other builds an empire, not because one is smarter, but because one takes ownership. They don't say, the market is bad. They say, my strategy needs to improve. They don't say, no one gave me a chance. They say, I need to create my own leverage. They don't say, this is impossible. They say, I haven't solved it yet. That one word changes everything. Yet. It keeps the mind open. It keeps the system flexible. It keeps progress alive. Responsibility is not about blaming yourself. It's about claiming control. It's saying, if this is my life, then I own the steering wheel. Not emotionally, not theoretically, practically, with your actions, your habits, your decisions. Every day, this is why extreme responsibility is the root trait, because every other trait grows from it. Discipline comes from it. Confidence comes from it. Focus comes from it. Leadership comes from it. Even resilience comes from it. You don't become resilient by being positive. You become resilient by knowing no matter what happens, I'll handle it. That belief is unshakable. And once it's installed, your entire identity shifts. You stop asking, what will happen to me? You start asking, what will I make happen? That's the moment you stop being average. Not because your life changed, but because you did. Here's the truth most people miss. Talent doesn't create success. Leverage does. Motivation doesn't create results. Consistency does. Confidence doesn't create power. Control does. And responsibility is where control is born. The moment you blame something outside yourself, you give up control. You might feel relieved. You might feel justified. You might even feel correct. But you're weaker because now the solution is no longer in your hands. It's in the economy, in other people, in timing, in circumstances. And anything you can't control can't be used to build your future. Blame feels good in the moment, but it costs you long-term power. Responsibility feels uncomfortable, but it gives you leverage. And leverage beats everything. Leverage over time, leverage over habits, leverage over decisions, leverage over learning. That's how real success is built. Not through bursts of effort, but through systems of control. Billionaires understand something simple. If I control my inputs, I can shape my outputs. They don't obsess over results. They obsess over variables. What they read, what they learn, who they listen to, how do they think? How do they spend their energy? They build environments that force growth, not motivation, systems, because motivation fades. Energy fluctuates, emotions change, but systems are compound. Responsibility is what makes systems possible. With responsibility, you design your schedule, you design your standards, you design your skill set, you design your future. Most people drift. They wake up, they react, they respond to notifications, they respond to problems, they respond to life. Billionaires don't react. The architect. They decide in advance what matters, what doesn't, what gets focus, what gets ignored. That's control. And control is the highest form of power, because power isn't dominance. Power is not needing permission. Power is being able to say, this is the direction. I'm moving anyway. Even if no one agrees, even if no one understands, even if no one supports you. Responsibility removes dependency. You stop depending on validation, encouragement, perfect conditions, external approval. You become self-directed. That's rare. Because most people want to be pushed. They want accountability partners. They want motivation videos. They want someone to remind them. Billionaires push themselves, not emotionally, structurally. They build routines that force action. They build rules that eliminate debate. They build feedback loops that expose weakness. No drama, no stories, just data and adjustments. That's responsibility in action. And here's the real reason this trait beats everything. Because it scales. You can't scale motivation. You can't scale willpower. You can't scale inspiration. But you can scale systems. And systems only work when someone owns them fully. No excuses. No emotional outsourcing. No hidden blame. Just ownership. Responsibility turns failure into feedback. Instead of, I messed up, it becomes, this process needs improvement. Instead of, I'm not good at this, it becomes, I need better training. Instead of, this isn't for me, it becomes, I haven't mastered it yet. That shift is subtle, but it's everything. Because now failure doesn't stop you. It teaches you. It doesn't damage your identity. It upgrades your strategy. That's why billionaires fail more than most people. But they don't internalize it emotionally. They analyze it mechanically. What broke? Why? What gets fixed? Then they move again. No shame, no drama, no self-pity, just iteration. Responsibility turns life into a game of improvement. Every problem becomes a level. Every mistake becomes data. Every setback becomes training. And over time, this creates something unstoppable. While others repeat the same year 10 times, you upgrade every month. While others explain their situation, you redesign yours. While others hope for change, you manufacture it. That's why this trait beats intelligence. That's why it beats talent. That's why it beats luck. Because intelligence without responsibility creates potential with no execution. Talent without responsibility creates ability with no direction. Luck without responsibility creates results with no sustainability. But responsibility with average skill, that builds empires, slowly, quietly. Relentlessly, not through intensity, but through control. Billionaires don't think emotionally. They think structurally. They don't ask, how do I feel about this? They ask, how does this work? They separate identity from outcomes. Failure is not personal. Success is not emotional. It's all information. They treat life like a system. Processes, outputs. If the output is wrong, they don't panic. They inspect the process. Where did the system break? What variable changed? What assumption was wrong? Then they adjust. No drama, no attachment, no storytelling, just analysis. Most people think in stories. I'm unlucky. This always happens to me. I'm just not good at this. Billionaires think in mechanics. This didn't work. Here's why. This needs redesign. Stories create emotion. Mechanics create progress. That's the difference. They don't seek comfort. They seek clarity. Comfort protects the ego. Clarity improves the system. And systems win. They also think long-term by default. Not next week. Not next month. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. They optimize for trajectories, not moments. Short-term pain is acceptable if the long-term curve improves. That's why they can endure pressure. That breaks most people. They're not focused on today's feelings. They're focused on future positioning. They ask different questions. Not how much will I make, but what skills will matter in 10 years. Not what job should I get, but what leverage can I build. Not how do I look successful, but how do I become valuable. Value first, money follows, always. They also think in second order effects. Not just what happens now, but what happens because this happens. If I make this decision, what does it force me to do next? If I avoid this problem, what does that cost me later? They see chains, not dots. They understand the consequences compound. Good decisions create options. Bad decisions create constraints. And constraints are invisible prisons. That's why they choose discomfort early. They learn skills before they need them. They build networks before they ask. They save capital before opportunities appear. Preparation looks boring, but it creates freedom. They also manage attention ruthlessly. They know attention is limited and focus is expensive, so they protect it. They don't scroll randomly. They don't argue with strangers. They don't chase noise. They invest attention where returns are highest. Learning, building, thinking, designing. They eliminate distractions like liabilities because every distraction is a tax on future success. They also don't compare themselves emotionally. They don't compete on image. They compete on execution. They don't need to look rich. They need to become effective. They measure progress in skills gained, systems built, problem solved, leverage created, not in likes, not in applause, not in recognition. Recognition is a side effect, not the goal. They also expect resistance. They assume things will break. They assume people will doubt them. They assume plans will fail. So when problems appear, they're not surprised. They're prepared. They built their mindset for friction. Not easy. They don't say, why is this happening? They say, of course this is happening. Then they adapt. They also understand one brutal truth. Nobody is coming. No one will rescue you. No one will simplify it. No one will carry the weight, so they stop waiting. They take full ownership of the outcomes they want. They become self-directed. No external permission needed. No emotional dependency required. Just direction. Just action. Just iteration. And here's the deepest layer. They think in identity, not what they do, but who they are becoming. They don't say, I'm trying to succeed. They say, I'm building myself into someone who succeeds. That's subtle, but it changes behavior permanently. Because now every action is a vote for their future self. Every habit reinforces identity. Every decision shapes direction. They don't chase goals. They build standards. Goals can be missed. Standards become who you are. And once identity is aligned with growth, progress becomes automatic. Not easy, but inevitable. That's how billionaires think. Not louder, not faster, not luckier, just more precise. Now we make it real. This is not a theory. This is an application. Responsibility only works if it turns into action. Otherwise, it's just a concept. So here's the framework. Simple, practical, relentless. 4 steps. No complexity, no fluff. Step 1, no excuses. This is the hardest part. Not because excuses are rare, but because they're invisible. They hide in logic. They hide in emotion. They hide in realistic thinking. You say, I'm too busy. I don't have time. I need more information. I'll start next week. All excuses. They sound reasonable, but they delay action. The rule is simple. If it explains inaction, it's an excuse. Cut it. No emotional stories, no justifications, no self-negotiation, just outcomes. What did I do? What didn't I do? What result did that create? Facts only. Step 2, control the inputs. You can't control outcomes, but you can control variables: time, attention, effort, learning, environment. Most people focus on goals. Billionaires focus on inputs because goals are abstract. Inputs are real. You don't control success. You control actions that create it. You don't control income. You control skill development. You don't control confidence. You control preparation. So you audit your life. Where does your time go? Where does your energy leak? What habits run automatically? Then you design inputs intentionally. What you read, what you watch, who you listen to, what you practice daily. That's where progress is built, not in dreams, in routines. Step 3, build systems. Systems remove friction. They eliminate decision fatigue. They reduce emotional resistance. They force consistency. Motivation is unreliable. Systems are permanent. A system doesn't ask how you feel. It runs anyway. You don't decide to work out. Your schedule decides. You don't feel like learning. Your routine forces it. That's how high performers operate. They don't rely on willpower. They design environments, alarms, calendars, checklists, rules. Not fancy, but effective. Systems turn discipline into automation. Step 4, weekly review. This is where growth compounds. Once a week, you sit with reality. No judgment, no emotion, just questions. What worked? What failed? What got avoided? What needs adjustment? You look at behavior, not intention. You don't care what you planned, you care what you did. Then you refine the system. Remove friction, increase leverage, eliminate waste, small adjustments. Every week, over time, this creates momentum. Not dramatic, but unstoppable. This framework works because it removes self-deception. You stop lying to yourself. You stop romanticizing effort. You stop overestimating progress. You face facts, and facts create growth. Most people avoid systems because systems expose truth. They reveal habits. They reveal priorities. They reveal discipline gaps. That's uncomfortable, but discomfort is data. It shows you exactly where your future is leaking. Responsibility means you don't escape that. You stay with it. You don't say, this system doesn't work. You say, my execution needs redesign. You don't quit. You iterate. That's the real skill. Not starting, not planning, adjusting. Every successful person is just someone who adjusted faster than everyone else. They didn't avoid mistakes. They shortened feedback loops. They failed. They learned. They updated. They moved again. That's the framework in action. No emotion, no drama, no identity crisis. Just observe, adjust, repeat. And here's the key. This framework doesn't depend on motivation. It doesn't depend on confidence. It doesn't depend on mood. It depends on the structure, which means it works on bad days. It works when you're tired. It works when you're distracted because it removes choice. And removing choice is how you remove self-sabotage. You don't debate. You don't negotiate. You execute. That's why this framework scales. You can use it for money, health, skills, relationships, career, anything that requires growth. Because growth is not emotional, it's mechanical. And this framework turns responsibility into a machine, not at the level of actions, but at the level of identity. Because behavior follows identity. Always. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. Goals are temporary. Identity is permanent. Most people try to change their lives without changing who they are. So they struggle. They set new goals. They make new plans. They feel inspired. Then they return to old habits, old reactions, old limits, because the identity stayed the same. And identity always wins. You can't outperform who you believe you are. If you see yourself as undisciplined, you will act undisciplined. If you see yourself as unlucky, you will act passively. If you see yourself as average, you will make average choices, not consciously. That's why real change feels strange, because it requires letting go of a familiar self-image. A new identity feels uncomfortable at first. It feels fake. It feels forced. It feels unrealistic. But that's a sign you're upgrading. Billionaires don't ask, what do I need to do? They ask, who do I need to become? That question changes everything, because now actions are no longer an effort. They are aligned. You're not forcing discipline. You're expressing identity. You're not chasing growth. You're acting in character. And character is powerful. Identity creates automatic behavior. You don't negotiate with yourself. You don't debate. You don't hesitate. You just act, because that's who you are now. A responsible person doesn't try to take responsibility. They take it. A disciplined person doesn't feel like being disciplined. They are disciplined. A leader doesn't wait to lead. They lead. That's the shift from effort to embodiment. Most people live in performance mode. They practice good habits. They perform with confidence. They perform productivity. But performance is unstable. The moment energy drops, the performance collapses. Identity doesn't collapse. It's stable. It runs even when motivation disappears. That's why billionaires focus on standards, not goals. Standards define behavior. Goals define outcomes. Outcomes change. They don't say, I want to succeed. They say, I don't miss my commitments. They don't say, I want to be confident. They say, I prepare until I trust myself. They don't say, I want more money. They say, I build value daily. Those are identity statements. They describe who someone is, not what they want. And your brain listens. Every time you act in alignment, the identity strengthens. Every time you break alignment, the old identity survives. That's why small habits matter. They are votes for your future self, not massive actions. Boring ones, unseen ones, uncelebrated ones. That's where identity is built. Not in big moments, in quiet consistency. Most people wait for confidence before they act. But confidence is the result, not the requirement. You act first. Identity follows. You don't become responsible. Then take responsibility. You take responsibility until you become responsible. That's how identity forms. Through repetition, through evidence, through self-trust. Once you see yourself as someone who keeps their word, your behavior upgrades automatically. You stop quitting early. You stop self-negotiating. You stop breaking promises. Not because you're trying harder, because breaking alignment now feels wrong. It conflicts with who you are. That's real discipline, not forcing yourself, but protecting your identity. And this is where most people fail. They try to change outcomes without changing self-image, so they fight themselves. Every action feels heavy. Every habit feels forced. Every improvement feels temporary. Billionaires redesign identity first. They decide, I am someone who solves problems. I am someone who adapts fast. I am someone who takes ownership. Then they act in alignment until it becomes natural. At first, it's intentional, then it's automatic. At first, it's an effort, then it's the default. That's the real transformation, not external success. Internal consistency. You become predictable to yourself. And once your identity is aligned with growth, you don't need motivation. Growth becomes your baseline, not something you chase, something you live. That's the identity shift. From trying to change your life to becoming someone who can't help but improve it. Everything you've heard comes down to one truth. Every billionaire shares one thing. No one is coming. No mentor is going to rescue you. No system is going to save you. No perfect opportunity is going to appear. This is your life, and it's happening right now. Not after more planning, not after more information. Now. That's not pressure, that's power. Because if no one is coming, then nothing is missing. You already have what you need. Time, a mind, a body, a chance. That's enough. Most people wait for permission. Permission to start. Permission to fail. Permission to grow. Billionaires don't ask for permission. They authorize themselves. They decide, this is the direction, this is the standard, this is the path. And then they move, not because they feel ready, but because waiting costs more than action. They understand something brutal. Time is the only non-renewable asset. Money can be rebuilt. Skills can be learned. Mistakes can be corrected. Time can't. Every day you delay, you trade your future for comfort. And comfort is expensive. It costs momentum. It costs confidence. It costs potential. Responsibility is the opposite of comfort. It's choosing growth. Even when it feels heavy, it's a choice of action. Even when it feels uncertain, it's choosing progress. Even when no one is watching. That's real power. Not status, not applause, no recognition. Power is knowing no matter what happens, I'll handle it. Not perfectly, not easily, but deliberately. That belief changes how you stand, how you speak, how do you decide. You stop shrinking, you stop waiting, you stop negotiating with fear. You move anyway, not recklessly, but intentionally. Because you trust yourself now. Not your mood, not your motivation, your standards. And standards don't fluctuate, they hold. That's why this trait changes everything. Extreme responsibility doesn't make life easier. It makes you stronger. It doesn't remove obstacles. It removes excuses. It doesn't guarantee success. It guarantees growth. And growth compounds, quietly, daily, relentlessly. Most people want a breakthrough. Billionaires build systems. Most people want a moment. Billionaires build momentum. Most people want to be inspired. Billionaires build discipline. Not emotional discipline, structural discipline. The kind that works, even when you don't feel like it. The kind that survives doubt. The kind that survives failure. The kind that survives boredom. That's the discipline that builds legacies. Not dramatic actions. Not viral moments. Daily alignment with responsibility. Showing up when it's inconvenient. Executing when it's uncomfortable. Adjusting when it's unclear. That's the real work. And it's invisible. No one applauds it. No one celebrates it. No one sees it. But it works. Over time, something shifts. Your reactions change, your standards rise, your identity upgrades. You stop asking, what will happen to me? You start asking, what will I make happen? That's the line. That's the moment. The moment you stop waiting and start leading your own life. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, consistently, deliberately. And that's how every real success story begins. Not with luck, not with talent, with a decision. This is my life. This is my responsibility. And I'm done waiting. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, my friends.